that kind of ties it together.
Right. And what I like too is when I was reading like your manuscript as I was going through this, I pointed out to you a couple of times. I said, it's like I'll be reading this story and I see a picture of your mom and dad and we go through this story and then just real seamlessly, you just kind of like segue into Psychology Today pointed out this leader, wrote in his book. And then all of a sudden I found myself like into the leadership lesson. And it was almost like, well, when did the personal story stop and the leadership lesson start? They just naturally just so seamlessly flow, run one thing right into the other. Was that by design when you did that? Or was that kind of like, oh, this is a good story. All right, now what leadership lesson can I go and find? Or how did in your mind, did it just flow really easily or did you have to go kind of hunt these things down?
I think it flowed. I don't want to use the word easily, but I think it flowed because a quote from my grandpa or what my mom stood for in terms of modeled, you do play it out later on. You're like, he could have heeded the advice of my grandpa. I know that because it wouldn't have turned out this way. So you get a lot of feedback or reinforcement of that's a really good quote from my grandpa or my mom or whatever it is. I think the tie into leadership, maybe, quite honestly, maybe I got sick of writing about myself, because the story is the story, right? And that's kind of to set the person up, and then you give them the clinker. And so whether it's a leadership lesson or at the end of each chapter was a leadership interview, and they got to tell their story, show their muscle in leadership, I think it just flowed because after a while, I would talk about my grandpa who was a business owner, and then you talk about business owners and then leadership in business and then, a pitfall in business. And so it just was easy just to move from what my grandpa presented to maybe what a reader could use today. Hey, I'm Greg from the Craig and Greg Show. And if you've enjoyed this clip, please go for the full edition and subscribe so you get notified when we send another episode for you to be challenged as a leader.